Hello. This is intended to be the first of probably several, if not many, videos looking at the individual, unique movements found in Yang 88 standardized, simplified Yang style Taijiquan. Now, if you are already an experienced Yang style practitioner, then especially in the traditional forms, then many of our moves will doubtlessly look a little bit different from what you are familiar with, and that's fine. The principles should all be more or less the same. Now, as we go into this, often in video content for Tai Chi, you'll either run into charlatans now and then, or you will run into an approach to instruction that emphasizes the external elements of the moves, such as where our hands should be, how much weight should be on which foot, where our feet should be positioned, what direction the toes should be pointing. All of these are very important, especially at the beginner level and the introductory level. But I would like to also bring into more of the internal components of what should I be relaxing as I do the move? How do I activate a system of tension in order to maintain my posture while also focusing on relaxation, as our instructors frequently tell us to do. So as we go through these movements, most of this will be done in hopefully only one or two takes, so bear with my mixing up of words or the periodic pause in my sentences as I determine what's next. So this is the first move of the Yang style 88 simplified form. It is derived from the longer form, although as far as I can tell, it's more or less identical in terms of move count, just perhaps how the moves are counted sometimes is anyone's guess. The important part for these first couple movements, we're going to go over the first one, which is considered the opening or the commencement. This is simply just raising the arms up, stepping out, raising the arms up, and settling in order to prepare to begin the form and begin the form. And then the first part of the next move, which is the first step forward before encountering our favorite move in the Yang style, which is the grasp sparrow's tail, or more commonly, Penglu Jian. On doing the opening, we want to start off with our feet together and our hands by our sides, preferably with our frogs in a line too, but we'll handle that as we get there. First thing we do, bring all of our weight over to our right foot, because we will be opening with our left. So shift the weight, and now bend the knees. As we bend the knees, we want to think of dropping our pelvis just enough so that we can activate our core to pull this foot up and pull it across. Shift the weight 50-50. So now 50% of my weight is in my right leg, 50% is in my left. In order to bring our hands up, we want to relax the shoulders, relax the arms, relax the elbows, relax the chest, even part of the core as much as we can, relax the lower back, and then pull through the back. Hips relax as if we're sitting into a bar stool, and as the hands begin to come down, we begin the form. Shift into the left, relax the right hip, open the right hip, right leg, and now we shift into that leg and prepare to step forward, which we do. Shift, expand, finish. My right hand is sitting on my table, my left hand is palmed towards me in front of me in a nice round shape. Weight is approximately 60%, 65% forward, all through mostly the heels, and I've relaxed into a nice open structure. The intent for this move that we're thinking about is expansion, getting bigger like inflating a balloon. As mentioned before, we want to focus on some of the internal components of what our form is doing here. So when we think of internal component of Tai Chi, I don't want to mystify this beyond what is necessary, because that's usually tends to obfuscate what's being talked about, as if there's some sort of invisible mystical force at work here. I'm not looking at anything like that. The difference between the external and the internal components are the external components are the things you can plainly see with your eyes. In other words, I can watch a master do a particular movement, and I can look at what direction his feet are pointing. I can look at where his knees are in relative position to his ankles. Are they collapsed? Are they directly over his ankles? Or I can look at the position of his pelvis, whether it's jutting out to the back with a overpronounced anterior pelvic thrust, or if it is dropped and settled in a position like we were taught Taiji should be operating according to. Likewise, we can see where his hands are positioned. If he's doing movement, not just holding a posture, we can see the pattern that his hands are making through space. We can see whether his torso is wobbling as he's doing something or if it's nice and stable and steady. All of these are external components. We can see them plainly with our eyes, and we don't need too much insight into the inner workings of the body in order to figure out how to at least imitate these positions and these movements ourselves. The internal components, however, are the things that we can't see, or at least when you do see them, you don't necessarily know that you're looking at them without some training involved. Often that training is going to include things like pushing hands and partner work, where you can actually feel how somebody can relax, and you can also feel how you can relax on somebody else's contact. This is an important distinction to make because obviously, when you're learning Tai Chi, you have to start off with the external components. You have to start off looking at how are his feet positioned, how are his hands positioned, how is he moving through space, and then start to build up, once you have this understanding, start to build up an internal awareness of you doing the movements as you understand them. And as you do them more, your awareness and understanding will hopefully increase, but it'll certainly change no matter what happens because you're continually doing a series of movements over and over again. So when we're looking at the beginning, the first move, our opening and settling, we want to focus externally. You can see plainly what we're doing. We're lifting our arms up to about shoulder height and then dropping them back down again. In this case, dropping only one down into the position of holding the ball. Internally, we should be considering relaxing, pulling from the farthest part of the body as we can. In this sense, when we lift our arm, we don't want to think of having all of our awareness in our hand or in our wrist. We want to think of our awareness pulling the whole arm through the back, and if we can, through the lower back and even through part of the core, but especially through the back of the shoulder up here. In order to lift this up, we don't want to lift up like so, because as you can see, that pulls all of this out of alignment. That's not what we want. What we want is to keep all of this in our nice aligned posture, and as a result, we want to think of keeping the shoulders settled, but pulling through the back and settling into our hips in order to get this arm to come up. You can even test this yourself. When you are holding something or lifting something heavy, if you try to lift it with just your shoulders, if you're sufficiently strong enough, you could probably do that depending on the weight of the object in question. However, doing that is going to strain the shoulders a little bit more than is comfortable. And if it's heavy enough or the movement is sudden enough, you may actually pull a muscle or hurt your shoulder or do something worse. So when we lift heavy objects, especially with mainly just our arms, we want to think of settling the shoulders, dropping the shoulders, and then lifting with the core in order to do so. Same thing is at play here with this first move of the Yang style 88 form. We want to, pretty much with any Taiji form that I've ever studied too, begins more or less exactly like this. So if you do some other style of Taiji, then there you go. Now, the second part of this, the internal component at least, as we shift into that foot, we're opening the right foot. So whenever we shift our weight and turn our hips, we want to make sure, as external goes, that our knees don't follow our turn. In other words, if my toes are pointed forward, I don't want my knees to be pointed off at some angle like so. The knees are very well designed to be doing this kind of motion, and they tolerate some of this motion, but you don't want to get used to doing this kind of motion because it doesn't handle very much of it. You'll end up with horrible knee pains and damage if you get used to that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that when we turn our hips, the knees stay in line with our toes. A full-length mirror can help with this training, and every once in a while, I don't encourage you to look down at your feet while you do your Tai Chi, but if you don't have a mirror accessible, then every once in a while you can look down and make sure that your knees and your toes are on the same line. So with that out of the way, when we are settling into our hips after we've lifted the arms, we are going to start to turn in the hips and relax as much as we can those hip flexors inside of the hip joint and push our weight onto one foot. We're going to open the other foot and then shift onto that foot that we just opened. Very common movement to make in Tai Chi. In fact, it's a very common movement to make in any sort of slow and controlled weight-bearing exercise. So keep that in mind as you go forward. Again, not just with Tai Chi, but especially with Tai Chi. Our step forward should also be from the core. So when we pull the foot in to bring the feet close together without necessarily touching, you can if you need to for balance purposes. When we step out, pulling the foot in first, we're almost compressing the core a little bit. Not too much, but almost kind of like doing a sit-up. When we do a sit-up, we're activating those deep core pelvic muscles to pull our body upwards. We're doing the same thing more or less. It's a little different, but it's basically the same idea here in order to bring our foot, our knee, our leg towards our torso. So it's the opposite piece being attracted to the opposite piece. Same kind of basic mechanic, while our standing leg is remaining nice and relaxed, planted and firm as our rooted leg. So in order to push that foot out and step forward, we are then reversing that compression motion, uncompressing and expanding through the heel until the heel makes contact with the floor. And then we carry on a version of this same sort of expansion and compression as we shift our weight through the pelvis from the back leg into what is now our front leg to a stable position, which is, like I said before, roughly 60 to 70% of our weight being forward. You will notice as you do this move, or as you have learned this move, or as you watch this move performed here, that this expansion through the pelvis is occurring also through the rest of the abdomen in order to pull the arms into their positions. The front arm especially should be characteristic of what we would call a ward-off in English, or at least as I was taught. Ward-off being a motion that is directed outward in an expansive aspect, sort of like inflating a beach ball or a balloon. We don't want to think of just pushing forward with it. We don't want to think of just coming upward with it. We want to think of forward, upward, outward from our core. Our core is our center of, our core is our point of reference. Anything that we're talking about in terms of direction, internal or external, is going to be with reference to the core, with relation to the core. This concludes the first part of our instructional series, first piece of it at least. The next video I expect to cover, if not all of Grasp Sparrow's Tail, it will probably be the first half of it. There is a lot to cover in those series of movements. I look forward to doing it. I've been wanting to do this now for a number of years, so we'll see how it turns out. It is our hope that you have gotten something out of this video, whether it is just a sudden interest to go and pick up Tai Chi from your local Tai Chi studio, such as ours, located here in Glen Burnie, Maryland. Or if you're someone who's been practicing for a long time and perhaps looking for something to critique, maybe you've gotten something out of this such that it made you think a bit deeper about the moves you've known for a long time, or variations thereof. So if you've stuck around this long, thank you for watching, and we look forward to having you back again.